It is 1 a.m. in Washington and noon in Bangkok and 2 p.m. on Tuesday, 20th of May here in Korea. I'm Moon Gun-young, live from Seoul. Your headlines at this hour. An intense scene in Thailand. The army declares martial law in a surprise move that an aide to the embattled prime minister refers to as half a coup d'etat. We speak to someone on the scene. The Korean government begins to draw up the specifics of the nation's safety improvement measures laid out by President Park Geunhye during a televised public apology. And President Park Geunhye is in the United Arab Emirates for a ceremony marking the installation of a Korean-built nuclear reactor there. But is there a future in Korea's nuclear facility exports? We'll have those stories and more, but first, let us begin in Thailand. Martial law has been declared by the army there. Pro and anti-government protesters have been warned in no uncertain terms not to move around Bangkok. The declaration comes after months of unrest and the deepening political crisis in the country. Our Kwon Soa starts us off.
Thailand is under temporary military rule as the army in the early hours of Tuesday morning local time declared nationwide martial law to restore order in the crisis-hit country.
To maintain peace and order and bring back peace into all groups and all sides as soon as possible, I used Law Section 2 and 4 on Martial Law 2457 to announce martial law all over Thailand.
He denied a military coup was underway, only saying the army needs to take charge of public security. General Prayuth also urged people to carry on with their business as usual. Thai public television showed images of soldiers outside broadcast stations in Bangkok Tuesday, announcing that all TV stations were being secured by the military. An aide to the interim prime minister was quoted as saying the move had not been relayed to the government beforehand and that it remains to be seen whether the army chief will agree to stay impartial. The aide added this declaration of martial law was half a coup. Thailand's army has staged 11 coups since the end of absolute monarchy in 1932. The last one occurred in 2006. The declaration of martial law comes 2 weeks after Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra was ousted from office, along with 9 cabinet ministers for allegedly abusing their power. Anti-government protesters had wanted Yingluck out for months. The government had scheduled elections for July 20th after earlier polls were cancelled due to mass protests. The next elections are also likely to be boycotted by anti-government protesters who want the remnants of Yingluck's government out and a neutral leader installed. Kwon Soa, ARIRANG News.
And Korea's foreign ministry is considering issuing a travel warning to Thailand for the safety of Koreans with plans to visit the Southeast Asian country or its nationals there. Now let's try getting a better sense of what the situation is like there on the streets of Bangkok and what's ahead for that country. For that, Taepachai Young joins us live on the line. He is the executive director and editor-in-chief of Bangkok-based Nation Multimedia Group. Taepachai Young, thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning.
Now, first of all, give us a brief overview of what the situation is like there. What does martial law look like in Thailand?
I think for the normal people, life goes on as usual. But of course, politically speaking, this will be a crucial step that we hope will lead to some kind of a settlement that can be reached among all the conflicting parties.
Right. We'd like to know what the overview of the situation there. I mean, there have been months-long political unrest in Thailand. How did it come about to this point?
I think of course, the reason cited by the army in imposing the martial law was the potential of violence that would be caused by all the conflicting parties. And of course, we have seen attempts by the Senate, to try to break the deadlock. But the last straw that I think led the army to decide to impose martial law was a failure the Senate and the government to agree to a settlement yesterday, because that is being seen as the potential for a bloody conflict.
Now, what about what's next for Thailand? I mean, are we looking at an all-out elections taking place or appointment of a new government by the army? I mean, what does the army have in mind?
I think we see in this move. I think the martial law is probably part of the army's attempt to try to help break the deadlock. So in a way, it should help speed up the process of the dialogue that the Senate is trying to have with the government. And I think we should provide a good opportunity for all these conflicting parties to sit down and try to find a way out.
All right, well, certainly a very tense situation there on the streets of Bangkok. Many thanks to you. That was Tepachai Young, Executive Director and Editor-in-Chief of Nation Multimedia Group, live from Bangkok.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Moon Gon-yong, live from Seoul.
Mobile shopping market for the dual use of the Korean name East Sea and Japanese name Sea of Japan in school textbooks in the state. The Sewol ferry disaster has rocked public confidence in the Korean government and raised critical questions about just how safe we are as we go about our daily lives. President Park Geunhye pledged wide-ranging reforms in a televised address on Monday to ensure a similar tragedy never happens again. The government has already begun the process of making sure the president's words become reality. ARIRANG News Kim Ji-yeon reports.
The government wasted no time initiating follow-up measures to President Park Geunhye's package of remedies to ensure another disaster like the Sewol ferry accident does not happen in the future. As her address wrapped Monday, officials led by Presidential Chief of Staff Kim Gi-chun broke President Park's remedies into 5 main sectors and 27 measures in total. The main sectors are the restructuring of government, reforming how government officials are appointed, proposing a special law to the National Assembly authorizing the establishment of a fact-finding committee into the ferry disaster, the establishment of a national safety ministry, and the establishment of a monument and a People's Safety Day on April 16th, the day of the ferry disaster. President Park singled out corruption as the main factor undermining the country's safety standards, saying it created an atmosphere where the ferry could sink and take so many lives with it.
공직 유관단체 기관장과 감사직에는 공무원을 임명하지 않을 것입니다. 퇴직 공직자의 취업 제한 대상 기관 수를 지금보다 3배 이상 대폭 확대하겠습니다.
Prime Minister Chung Eung-won called for all-out efforts Tuesday to revamp the country's safety management system and root out corruption among public officials. A large number of state-run organizations are headed by retired public employees that have worked in firms and organizations related to their former responsibilities. These officials have been described as part of a bureaucratic mafia because of their tendency to have collusive ties with those they were supposed to supervise or regulate. According to the state-run provider of public information, Allio, 51 out of 153 heads of public organizations, or roughly 1/3, could be categorized as bureaucratic mafia. President Park is expected to carry out a government reshuffle, including hiring a new prime minister after she returns from a 3-day trip from the UAE later this week. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
And over at the National Assembly, lawmakers have opened a plenary session that will attempt to find out just what went wrong in the Sewol ferry disaster. Lawmakers from both the ruling Saenuri Party and the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy put Prime Minister Chung Eung-won in the hot seat this Tuesday morning, or earlier this Tuesday morning, asking him whether the Coast Guard had taken appropriate measures at the time of the accident. The Prime Minister acknowledged that the Coast Guard had not carried out its full duties and said that further investigations to determine why were underway. Chung also said a safety control tower would be set up under the Prime Minister's office to overhaul the nation's safety management system. The Oceans Minister and the Coast Guard Chief are not expected to appear at the plenary session as the government says they are needed at the site of the ferry accident where search efforts continue for 17 victims still unaccounted for. Meanwhile, senior diplomats from North Korea and Japan will meet in Sweden next week as Tokyo seeks to accelerate discussions on the whereabouts of Japanese nationals kidnapped by the North decades ago. Japanese Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida said Monday that the three-day government-level talks will be held starting next Monday in Stockholm. It will follow up on the two countries' first talks in more than a year in March. While the North nuclear weapons program will be discussed, the Japanese abductees issue will top the agenda. North Korea admitted more than a decade ago that it had kidnapped 13 Japanese citizens in the 1970s and 80s. Only 5 of them were returned, and the North claims the others have since passed away. Japan believes the number of people abducted was much higher than that. Meanwhile, South Korea has expressed condolences to North Korea for last week's collapse of an apartment building in Pyongyang. In a letter sent earlier this morning through the truce village of Panmunjom, the South Korean Red Cross said it was saddened that so many people were injured and killed in the accident. The North has not provided a death toll, but the South Korean government estimates that it's in the hundreds. 92 families were believed to be living in the 23-story apartment building in the North Korean capital when it collapsed on May 13th. North Korea says poor construction was to blame. President Park Geunhye is scheduled to attend a ceremony in the United Arab Emirates in a few hours to celebrate the debut of a Korean-built nuclear reactor there. Now, she and others hope the deal will pave the way for more exports of Korea's nuclear technology, but will it? Our Na Hyung-kyung has this report.
The demand for building nuclear power plants globally has rebounded since Japan's Fukushima disaster in 2011. The World Nuclear Association in an earlier forecast says the market is worth $40 billion a year and will grow at around 3% annually by the year 2030. And officials say President Park making a short 2-day trip to the UAE, despite possible public backlash for diverting her attention away from the sunken ferry disaster, demonstrates the government's determination to bring more of Korea's nuclear technology to the overseas market. But some experts in Seoul say this will be easier said than done. Nuclear engineering professor Kwon Soa of Seoul National University told ARIRANG News that while Korea is able to build its own nuclear facilities, its technology independence level is still not up to 100%, as some of the core technologies still rely on foreign expertise and imported components. He also points out that if Korea wishes to win more deals from the international market, it needs the involvement of more than just the state-run Korea Electric Power Corporation, for example, participation from the private sector. That way, it can boost manpower and capital and have a better chance at beating competitors like Areva of France and General Electric of the United States. As for last year's corruption scandals involving nuclear energy officials, local experts say it's imperative that Korea clears its name on the global stage. Once Korea regains trust on top of securing a steady supply chain of uranium requirements, pundits say Korea should have a fair chance at inking more international deals in the future. Na Hyun-kyung, ARIRANG News.
Now, Korean companies operating in India are looking at the recent victory of the BJP and its leader Narendra Modi as an opportunity to expand business ties in a nation of 1.2 billion people. Modi, who is perceived as being market-friendly, has pledged to cut the nation's unemployment rate, and Korean firms will be making their case that they can create new jobs. POSCO is set to return to talks regarding the construction of a steel mill, which has been on hold for 9 years now due to land acquisition issues and environmental concerns. Samsung Electronics and LG plan to release a range of low-priced smartphones to meet growing demand there. Now, in a recent survey conducted on 200 Korean companies in India, 63% said they believe that business conditions would improve under the new Indian government. Despite signs of a recovery, Korea's share in global trade inched down last year for the first time since 1998. Figures released by the Bank of Korea and the Korea International Trade Association shows that Korea was 9th in combined imports and exports last year among members of the World Trade Organization. China topped the list, followed by the U.S., Germany, and Japan. Now, back in 1997, Korea ranked 12th and it fell 2 notches the following year after a foreign exchange crisis, but then had been steadily climbing up the ladder since. Experts attribute the fall to a slump in imports last year, which dipped 0.7% from a year earlier. Exports are not faring so well either in terms of the global share. Korea's share of exports in the global market came in under the 3% range for the second straight year in 2013. It's another thorn in the already thorny Sino-U.S. relations. China has denounced and denied the U.S. charges that 5 of its army officers hacked into the computers of American companies. It represents a shift in the way the U.S. goes after hackers. Here's our Yurian with this story.
China says charges that 5 of its military officers have been engaging in cyber espionage are completely made up. China's foreign ministry on Monday called on the U.S. to immediately withdraw its charges, saying they will only stand to damage U.S.-China relations. In the most immediate sign that they will, Beijing has already said they're suspending the activities of the China-U.S. Cyber Working Group, an initiative agreed on by both countries just 1 month ago. Earlier on Monday, U.S. prosecutors charged 5 Chinese military officers of stealing trade secrets from 5 companies. It's the first time the U.S. has filed such criminal charges against a foreign state.
What I think distinguishes this case is that we have a state-sponsored entity, state-sponsored individuals using intelligence tools to gain commercial advantage. And that is what makes this case different.
The accused officers belong to Unit 61398 of the People's Liberation Army, a unit long believed to be staffed by thousands of Chinese cyber troops. China denies any involvement, which doesn't come as a surprise to experts.
The Chinese have basically 2 responses. One is, we're not spying on you, we don't hack you. And the second one is, in fact, you guys are the biggest hacking empire in the world. We've seen through the Snowden revelations that you are constantly hacking into other countries' networks. You are the big hypocrites, and we are the biggest victims.
The landmark case is expected to pave the way for more indictments down the road, and it shows that the U.S. is serious about holding foreign governments accountable for cyber attacks. Washington estimates cyber espionage costs the U.S. economy as much as $100 billion a year. Yurian, ARIRANG News.
Korea will soon begin operating a magnetic levitation train out of the nation's gateway, which is the Incheon International Airport. This hyper-futuristic mode of transportation, like its name suggests, levitates above the track with the help of incredibly powerful magnets. Kim Min-ji has more.
Unlike conventional trains, this magnetic levitation train uses a powerful magnetic field to travel along the rails. It has no wheels and suspends itself about 8 millimeters above the tracks. Let's see how it works. The train encases the track in a C shape and electromagnets are attached on both the top and bottom. When electric current passes through the electromagnets placed underneath the tracks, the train lifts slightly. Now, when current also flows into the electromagnets above the track, the opposite poles of the magnet move into formation and create a push and pull effect, making the train move forward. As it uses a magnetic field to move, the noise created is only about 80% that of subway trains, and it also causes minimal vibration. Even when the maglev train travels at its maximum speed of 110 kilometers per hour, vibrations can hardly be felt inside. It can also be operated without an engineer, which cuts down operation costs.
There's no friction between the wheels and tracks, so maintenance costs are extremely low.
The train was created using homegrown technology and is being made safer through 2 years of efficiency tests. The braking distance has also been reduced to 100 meters, and the electronic waves the train emits are lower than those of a television.
It uses existing rail and road networks, and because it causes less noise and vibration, it is also eco-friendly.
After commercialization in July, Korea will become the second country in the world after Japan to operate the maglev train. It will run on a 6-kilometer rail line from Incheon International Airport and will be free of charge for the time being. 김민지, 아리랑 뉴스.
And now it's time for us to take a look at the arts and culture scene of Korea. And for that, of course, our Im Yoon-hee joins us live. Now, I hear that she has news of the revival of what many consider the first generation of K-pop artists. So good afternoon to you, Yoon-hee.
Good afternoon.
So I know we've talked about K-pop in the earlier weeks of our broadcast, but today you have news of some artists who are considered the first generation of K-pop.
Exactly right. So today I have a couple of Korea's favorite, and we're talking about none other than G.O.D. and Fly to the Sky. Now, these groups, when they first came out, were hugely popular, and when they disbanded, people were very disappointed, to say the least. Now, fans were hoping for a reunion, and that's exactly what we'll be seeing this summer. Let's take a look.
It's been almost 10 years, but now they're back. Earlier this year, G.O.D. announced a much-appreciated plan for a concert later this year. Celebrating their 15th year debut anniversary, G.O.D. has finally reconvened. Known as one of the leaders of the first-generation K-pop groups, G.O.D. paved the way for many to come, with their sold-out concerts and record-breaking tracks. But they may have set the bar a little too high, as they still hold the record for the most sold K-pop albums in 1 year. The 5-member group disbanded after their 100th concert in 2006, leaving many dedicated fans devastated. But with their return, they'll be one of the few first-generation K-pop groups still in existence. But they're not the only comeback to stir the waters of the music industry this year. Korea's very first R&B duo has also recently announced their return. Fly to the Sky originally debuted in 1999, and after a streak of records and successful albums, they parted ways after their 10th anniversary album. But after 5 years of pursuing their own careers, they've made many fans happy with the news of their solo concert set for this summer. Named after their soon-to-be-released new album, Continuum, their tour, set for 3 days next month, sold out within 10 minutes online, showing just how long-awaited their return has been. It's the return of old-school K-pop with a new spin, something that has K-pop fans of all ages anxious to see what's in store.
You know, I remember G.O.D. was very big maybe a decade ago, and it's really nice to see them, come back. I heard that they released their song early. Why is that?
Right, so May 9th, they did release a little sneak peek at their concert called The Lone Duckling. It's a ballad, and they did say the proceeds will go to the Seoul ferry accident. And the reason being is they want to kind of pique up interest into their concert and into their reunion.
Right, and of course, pay their respects to the victims of the Seoul ferry disaster. What about Fly to the Sky?
Right, so they also have their 9th album that they currently released actually today called The Continuum, and that's what their concert is named after. And so people are very excited for the release of that album, and they were pleased to hear that the duo really held on to their R&B, their tracks, their roots, and so it's an album that got everybody very excited.
Right, and we look forward to hearing their music, and we wish them all the best.
Good afternoon. It's cloudier in the nation's capital today than it was yesterday. However, temperatures are up, meaning more summer-like weather. Now, meanwhile, quite an amount of rain is in the forecast for Jeju Island and in the southern parts of the nation today, dropping down the highs of about 6 to 8 degrees compared to yesterday. Now, going over to our temperature readings, Seoul tops out at 27 this afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will both peak at 21 degrees. Now, moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops out at 20, Dokdo at 21, while Mount Kumgang tops out at 9. Now, as for the weather conditions down in Jindo, where search operations continues on the sunken Seoul ferry, strong winds and rain are hampering the efforts, but the speed of the currents has slowed. Well, that's all I have at this moment. I'm Michelle Park, and back to you, Kanyang.
Thank you, Michelle, for that. And that's just about all for me at this hour. I'm Moon Gon-young. Check back with us at 4 p.m. Korea time for Business Today.